that's great. All right. Did you just
We're gonna need more seats.
Yeah. No, it's on YouTube.
On YouTube side.
You got it. So here, 1 second, let me get it to you. Good. All right. You got it. That's better. No problem. Actually, that time I didn't. I'm good.
Sure, you're doing
Yeah, it's just that this
Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
I'm trying to like be on top of it.
Let's get you some seats. One, two. We're gonna use these seats together. Are there seats back there? How many? 3? 1. We're gonna put you there.
welcome. I'm going to ask everyone to silence their phones, if you don't mind. I hope you all enjoyed a beautiful Passover. Welcome back to MGE. For those of you who were away. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. It's really an honor, and you all show great honor to the memory of the 6 million by being here, by taking this evening seriously. We're going to be having the opportunity to interview somebody very special in just a few moments. But before we begin, I just want to mention that tonight's program is Saturday at MGE. I also want to give special thanks to Alan and Alicia Pines in remembering his grandparents, Harry, very deep Holocaust survivors. MGE pretty much geared for 20s. Kevin and Allison. I see Allison. Where's Kevin? There she is. Thank you, Zahara. Not least, Aliyah. Where is Aliyah? Okay, it takes a village. She's getting her vitamins ready.
And Shana and Moshe.
Where is Moshe and Shana? Are they here?
Not a wedding.
Oh, Shana, welcome. How are you? We want to thank Shana and Moshe for all their hard work. The second days of Yom Tov here was beautiful. Welcome and thank you for everything you do for okay. So as I was saying before, as many of you know, our mission is to engage 20s and 30s. And so by definition, we're not going to have, obviously, anyone in our own community that has witnessed or survived the horrors of Shoah. Our generation has thankfully been spared the pain that so many of our beloved grandparents or great-grandparents were put through. But since we didn't experience this ourselves, and of course we could go out and we can get a book, and there are a lot of books, and there are a lot of museums, but there's nothing like being able to speak to somebody who's been through this. Able to have a new lease on life, be positive, and be a great Jewish role model. Tonight we are privileged to hear from such a person, from our special guest, Felice Stokes. So far so good. Okay, Felice. And I asked him if he would come after our interview and briefly share that story, so I thank you both for being here tonight. We begin Zimmern in Veldern, Germany. Your sister, Bidi.
After 1940, and it wasn't a killing camp, but it was a rough camp. And I was there for about a year and a half. I don't know what my parents did. I know that my mother was a year and a half later, Limoges, to La Pouponnière, which is a very small, it was like a nursery with my sister.
But before you get to nursery, what do you have any, I know you don't have personal recollections, but what did they tell you about the camp? What did that really send to you?
It was not a good camp. It was very muddy, and it was, they had really almost no food. It was a very rough kind of place. That's all I. But I was not, to say, with my parents, because the children, and there were nurses who took care of all the children. But that's all there was.
Thank you. And were you, and your sister was with you?
My sister was with me, and then we were taken to Limoges. It was called La Pouponnière. Yeah, I was able to stay, but when she became 5, she was taken to family. But then it became very dangerous, so they took me. So I was taken to a family that was not Jewish. I was hidden there, and it was Châteauroux in France, in the south of France. And I was like their little girl. I used to call them Nene and Pepe, and they used to take me to church, and they called me Felice. At that point, I was Felice Patou, because that was their name. I didn't know I was Jewish, and I was there for about 2.5 years, and that was it.
And when was the last time that you saw your biological parents? Involved in that?
Not really. It was they made us so felt very loved, and it was people knew who I was, but they never said anything, you know. And I remember seeing the Bosch, which was the Germans. You know, I used to wave to them. I mean, I was maybe Bosch, which was the Germans. You know, I used to wave to them. I mean, I was maybe 3.5. And then after that, after the war,
and just before, was what this family did they have any other children in this family?
Yes, they had one son, and they knew what would happen. They would have been taken, and I know they all had come from the war, and nobody had parents with them. You know, the orphanage. That's what it means. And I was there for 3 years with my sister.
Orthodox.
Orthodox.
So there
Very
was
Orthodox.
Shabbat, there was
Everything.
kosher food,
Absolutely.
and when into this Orthodox orphan? What was that like? Was there?
You know, you're young, you accept it. Oh, I'm going over here, okay, so I'll learn Hebrew.
I tried that with MGers, but it doesn't quite work.
I mean, you know, I just took it as it came. I mean, okay, and we were all in the same boat, and my monitrice, my counselor, her name was Hélène, and she had been in Auschwitz, and she told us all kinds of unbelievable stories. And she said, and we were so interested in her stories. I mean, we didn't connect. We said, oh, this is very interesting. Tell us some more. And she told us about this little boy who couldn't walk, so they asked somebody in the truck to take the boy, and so they took the boy in, and then they shot him. I mean, she told us these stories, and we said, oh, that's nice, that's good. You know, that's what we didn't know, we really connect. They were taken from Rive South, which is another holding station, and then to Drancy, and then they were taken to Auschwitz on Convoy 40 in November 4th, 1942. They were both killed.
And when did you learn that? At what point?
I think I might have been here when I learned about it.
Did you try to, until you learned that they had perished in the camps, were you trying to find them? Were you?
No, not at all. I'm telling you, I was just, it was one of these, okay, so now I'm going here. We knew that we were going to go to, our aunt and uncle wanted us to come to America. That was my father's brother. Okay, we're going to go to America. I didn't really think about my parents. I don't think I knew what it meant to be a parent at that point.
And what was your relationship?
You mean in France?
Yeah, France.
Yes, very close. In fact, I went back to visit her. It was,
what was that like?
It was phenomenal. I mean, she kept saying, ma chère, ma petite. As a matter of fact, the son also died. But I was able to get them a recognition, you know, for Yad Vashem. So that I was able to do.
And what were the
to the Patous, and I didn't know who she was, and she came forward and she brought me this big pear. And I didn't like her because she looked very much like me. So she stayed with me for about not with me, with us, for about a few months, and then that's when we were taken to the first orphanage. And it was so painful to leave the Patous that for 2 years I couldn't really remember what had happened because it was very painful. That was very painful.
Leaving the family that took you in.
Right, yeah. Because then they took us to this orphanage. They were little kids.
And can I ask you why they did that? Why didn't they just leave you?
Because they were Jewish and they wanted us to
be Jewish.
To be Jewish, to join a Jewish group. They just, I mean, they would have kept, they wanted us to stay, but we couldn't because the OSA said no, that we had to, you know.
Are you happy? That's a crazy question. I mean, it must have been painful as a little girl being taken from the people who felt like they were your parents.
Right.
You're happy they did it though?
There was nothing I could do. I mean, I missed them. And then a while afterwards, I was interviewed by ABC. And they asked me about, because I was a person. So I said, and they took a picture of me in the subway. And I'm walking and I'm looking, and they said, make believe that you're looking for your parents. So I kept looking. I really wasn't looking for them. I was looking for the Patous. That's who I was looking for. And they were about to put it on TV, but then the Vietnam War started. So that took the precedence.
Did that distill relationship with Germany today?
Yeah, it's hard. But look, they gave back they're giving the money, you know, they give a restitution.
Right.
So it's hard, it's very hard.
Yeah. It must feel strange. I mean, you spend time, you know, all these Germans come to Israel, volunteer in kibbutzes, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of, Yeah, I'm not gonna press you on that. All right. The ship conditions. I'm supposed to ask you about the ship conditions when you came to this country.
I just learned about the cornflakes. I never had cornflakes. I also didn't have too much milk. And Colgate toothpaste, I learned that.
They had cornflakes on the ship? All right.
But the problem was, it wasn't just they speak French, and we didn't speak English. So that was a real problem. So I think a lot of it was, and there was a double bed, and I was upstairs, and she was very, she really wasn't thrilled with me being there, and she was very spoiled. It has to be New York to college. It was 1991, I think. I thought that I was because I was during the war. We have many friends, and I found out all the one thing that I found about my in the book it was written by Klausfeld. I forget the name of it, but there was all the names of everyone gone through the when they were killed. That's where I found my parents' names.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was your relationship to Judaism and sort of growing up as a young girl in America?
No, I like being Jewish. And as a fact, when I came to America, I was the one that was telling them how to daven in this home, because they didn't know. This was like a reform kind of a place. It was religious, not religious. It was religious, not religious. And I came to America and adopted, but I became conservative. I felt that's where I
that
belonged.
worked for you.
And my husband was, well, he was really.
There would have been one.
You try to make.
Did you talk to him a lot about your experiences?
Yeah, he was very supportive, and he came with me to the different conferences. He was at the home, to my foster parents. I've been very attached to a lot of people.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And why do you think it's important to share this story?
Well, because, first of all, to let them know that it did happen. I know that this audience knows that it happened, but to really connect with them, with younger people, and to tell them, even though I wasn't in a camp, Auschwitz, in any camp, and I didn't get a number, the pain is still there, because I did lose my parents, I lost my family. So that's been very hard, very hard. And the one that helped me was I went to therapy, and I had some wonderful people who really were on my side, and that's how I became happy,
Yes.
Hugo described the deportation. You will be astonished, but 8 days ago we had to leave Mannheim, no doubt. France was not prepared for this mass of people, and therefore there is a...
My question is stories. You just took it...
really completely repressed it and dealt with it. But beforehand, I really just ignored it completely. Now she lives months in Florida, and she has children, 6 grandchildren, and I have 2 in her shul, the first time together, go folk dancing, I also love folk dancing, but
It solves everything.
yeah.
Yes, Shana.
What made you decide to delve into your past?
That's a good question. Book, the Klaus book, and I saw my parents, and I really wanted, I went back to Germany, and I gave you a bicycle for my passport, and she almost thought I was my sister, because we looked very much alike. And she said that her daughter and my sister used to play together. So she couldn't believe that we were alive, you know. It was amazing. You know. So I really went back and I really needed it.
Yes, another.
Do you have anything when you
They gave me a shirt. They gave me everything. I didn't have anything when we came over. You know.
Hi, thank you for sharing your story. I missed the link to save your life. And I apologize. How come you were sent, from the camp to your family in
No, it's what we were deported to the now. I thought I was going to be a. I really needed more, more learning. I really needed therapy. That's what I needed. So I went to become a 40 years in this organ. So I don't know what else.
More and more young people are going there from here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. And I was on the bus, and I had made a reservation. Apartment, and I knocked on the door here for. You gotta let me make a phone call. So I made a phone call, and I called a friend, and myself. It really is very painful. Yeah.
A lot of people think, and they say 6 million, so like almost can be individual stories, and then you just think about all the people that didn't have. You're a survivor.
My father was born in Brooklyn, in Brownsville, at a time when Brownsville was like Flatbush today. Very Jewish, very modern Orthodox. My mother was on a farm in Czechoslovakia. My father-in-law, now deceased, grew up in Brownsville, but didn't know my father because he was 5 or 6 years older. So he was an older youth person. They didn't know each other. My mother-in-law grew up in Brownsville, but didn't know my father-in-law. My father decided that he is going to support Palestine, as it was called then, and he was marching in the streets with flags of Palestine, which we now identify as the flag of Israel. Meanwhile, my mother is on a farm in Czechoslovakia, and in 1937, her father goes to England because they couldn't make enough money on the farm. So he went to England, he was a tailor, and he was sending money back to the farm in Czechoslovakia. My mother had 3 siblings. One sister, when the war started, got married, moved to Belgium, and was hidden with her husband in a false apartment in Belgium, just like the Anne Frank story. Hashgacha pratis. Her other sister joined the French underground and survived. The third sibling, a brother, had 6 children already. All were killed by the Nazis, and his wife. He ultimately came to the United States. I'll tell you about that in a few moments. And he moved to Borough Park, became very Orthodox, and started Hatzalah in Borough Park. So now let's go back to my father. My father's 17 years old. He's beginning to understand what's happening in Germany. He lies about his age. He quits high school, joins the United States Army. My mother was able to stay on the farm until 1944. In 1944, the Jews in Czechoslovakia and in Hungary were finally removed by the Germans, and they took my mother to Auschwitz. And in the classic story with her mother, they were holding hands, and the Germans said, my grandmother goes this way, and my mother goes there. And my mother survived. My grandmother was, of course, immediately killed. And the thing about the inmates is that if the inmates in the concentration camps were young and healthy and capable of working, the Germans did in fact move them around. And there was a lot of movement from camp to camp, and my mother ultimately was moved to a place called Landsberg in Germany. And my father, as an American soldier with his troop, rescued my mother from Landsberg. And it's quite astounding that only on April 9th, a woman named Gerda Weissman also met her husband because he rescued her, and her obituary is in the New York Times. In fact, President Obama gave her the Medal of Honor and the Medal of Freedom, and their story is remarkable. The story is so remarkable that Steven Spielberg, who took it upon himself to document the stories of survivors, sent a team of videographers to the 5 homes of the people who survived, including my mother and father, and they stayed there for 9 hours describing their story. Well, my father now is with 15,000 people just rescued. His commander doesn't know what to do with it. But it's the United States Army, so what do? They build stuff. They build a barracks. There are 15,000 people, they all speak Yiddish. The commander, of course, is Irish, he doesn't know anything. He sees my father, he says, Borenstein, you speak Yiddish? He says, yeah, he says, you're camp. He was able to fly to London on his own, doesn't tell my mother because he wants to surprise her, flies to London because Jews are very good at record keeping. They actually have my grandfather's name in a shul. He finds him, and he says, I'm going to take care of you. Then my father flies back to Germany, and with another guy. After all, you're a soldier. You can do anything you want. You left. So the story we tell is that my father took out his pistol, and he put it to the head of the guy, and he says, you're out of here. The irony of that story is that when my wife Sharon and I moved to Springfield, New Jersey, the synagogue building itself wasn't built yet. We're davening in a house, and we meet this couple. We become very friendly with them. They're people who were in the camps. One thing leads to the other. Finally, we invite my parents for Shabbat about 6 months later. They go to Springfield, New Jersey. They see those people. I know who you are. Fate strikes again. My grandfather, who was from the Rabbi, who had just been Hasidish. And so this gentleman, my grandfather, is going back and forth. And he would leave right after Shabbos, let's say 8 o'clock. So my father goes out to Nostrand Avenue and sees my grandfather is lying on the ground. My father was a very enterprising man, and he decided, I am going to have mikveh in the store. But how do you get a Rebbe? And he says, will you give me the hashkacha for of all kinds of service for 8, service for 12, the mikveh in the back, so before Pesach, in the back, so before Pesach, that was him to buy stuff for Pesach. That was him to buy stuff for Pesach. So I'm the official mikveh boy. So I'm standing in the back of the store, all the Hasidim are lined up, and one little fence. So they now get ready to check out. My father's at the register. They say to my father, what are you doing? My father says, what do you mean? He says, I want my dishes tested. So I ended up testing dishes for that family. They probably had a very good Easter, and it went very well. I'm in NYU, go to Washington, D.C. She's worked for an organization you've all heard of called organization you've all heard of called Washington, D.C., Orthodox employee of the CIA, and he was guided. He did not have the opportunity to finish high school. By the time he became a senior, they had a lecture on vegetarianism, seemed a little vegetarianism. My wife Sharon and I used to go to my parents every Louis in the springtime. One year we come to my parents, the valedictorian of the, with all of the brutality and with the Chumash saying to us, Zachor. It tells it to us at least twice, Zachor, remember. At the same time, we should never forget that Hashem is in fact looking out for us, and Hashem in fact has divine providence, not only for the 6 million, but for every single person in this room. And from my personal point of view, thank you for listening to my story.
Mr. Bernstein, this is a great, great honor. We're going to, we do that, I just want to mention parents and your family, Felice, the entire Jewish people. We call Israel our own. It's our own country, and if I don't do a plug now, I don't know when I should come to Israel. It's this summer. On the 16th, worship group is going, and heritage trip. And I want to welcome and invite you this Shabbat, Friday night live here at 7 o'clock. Shabbat morning, Saturday morning, we're going to be dedicating this Shabbos to Israel. It's the Shabbos of transition from Yom HaShoah to Yom HaTzmaut. And next one night, I really want to say to some of you, there is no reason, well, there's every reason to have more people than we have now commemorating the Shoah and what the future of the Jewish people, which is Israel. That's next week, and I invite you to come back here. I'll be teaching a class from 8 to 9 on religious Zionism, and then at 9 o'clock we're going to have music, live music, and food, and falafel, and hummus, and just fun shops and things going on all over, and a really great Yom HaTzmaut event. I hope you will all join us and celebrate with us. You can ask everyone to please rise as we light the candles. Any other children or grandchildren of survivors that are here, just come forward and just light one of the large candles. Just take the matches, light the candle. We have them on both sides.
Yeah, right here.
Please remain standing. Kel Mullah is a special memorial prayer for the 6 million. El Malay Rachamim, Shochel Eitavonim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Al Kanfei Ashchina, B'mahalo Os Kedoshim B'Tovim, Kezor Rakia Masirim, Es Nishmos HaKadoshim B'Tovim, Shehemsu V'Shinergu V'Nishchatu, V'Shinisrifu V'Shinitbu V'Shinechniku, Al Kiddush Hashem, Al Yidei Hatzorim HaGermanim Yamach Shemam V'Zichram, Ba'avur Shli Neder Eten Stakavad Azkarat Nishmotehem, V'Gan Eden Teimenu Chatam, Lachein Bal Rachamim Yastirei Meseter Knafav Leolamim, Yitzror B'Tzror HaChaim Es Nishmotehem, Adonai Hu Nachlatam, V'Yanuch B'Shalom, Al Mishkavotehem. God full of mercy who dwells on high, and proper rest like the glow of the firmament for the souls of the holy and pure ones who were killed, murdered, slaughtered, burned, drowned, and strangled for the sanctification of the name through the hands of the German oppressors, and their name and memory be obliterated. Because without making a vow, I shall give to charity remembrance of their souls. May the resting place be the garden. Therefore, may the Master of mercy shelter them in the shelter of his wings for eternity, and bind their souls in the bond of life. Hashem is their heritage, and they repose in peace upon the resting places. Join with me. It's really out of the ashes of Auschwitz that the new Jewish state of Israel was born. This song was actually composed before these atrocities took place. It's Hatikva, it's the hope. The hope for the Jewish people, and as Mr. Bornstein spoke so beautifully about Hashgacha, about God's providence. We believe that Hashem, although his face may have been hidden during Shoah, during those dark years of the Holocaust, as Rabbi Soloveitchik talk about this next week a little, God came out of hiding and showered great blessing and success on the Jewish people, literally turning our history from one of darkness and sorrow to festivity and rejoicing. Please sing along. So much, Felice. Thank you, Mr. Bornstein. Thank you all for coming. Such honor this evening. Please join us across the hall for some refreshments. We'll see you on Shabbat. We'll see you next week. Thank you all for being here. Beautiful.